While the entire world was celebrating Jack Mallers' massive move, a much bigger play was unfolding. Almost no one saw it. For those out of the loop, Mallers just launched 21 Capital, kicking things off with a stealthy purchase of 42,000 Bitcoin. His mission? Maximize Bitcoin per share. A clear shot across the bow at Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy, the king of corporate BTC exposure. Until now. This has the makings of a heavyweight title fight. Mallers versus Saylor for the crown of Bitcoin-backed public equity. But while everyone's been glued to that headline, something else just quietly slipped through an SEC filing. A buyer with way more firepower just made a move that redefined the entire landscape. And today, I'm going to show you exactly who it is. Stick around. You're not going to want to miss this one. First off, for the people that are unfamiliar with the whole 21 Capital Jack Mallers thing, let's just hear it from the horse's mouth. Let's hear exactly what they're doing with 21 Capital.
Jack, when did this idea come to be?
The founding story. So I co-founded the business with Tether. I would say I've known the Tether Group for over a decade. There just weren't that many Bitcoiners around over 10 years ago. So we've done a lot of work together in El Salvador, et cetera. We've been so inspired by Michael Saylor and all of the public companies acquiring Bitcoin. But I would say over the last few years, that inspiration turned into what we thought was an opportunity and a hole in the market that we could deliver on, which is bringing blue chip credibility and startup upside. We feel like we can bring enough capital and be big enough to win. We're small enough to grow. And most importantly, a pure Bitcoin business. A lot of these companies, they're pivoting from a past operating business. They're rebranding, changing their name. They're maybe selling video games to buy Bitcoin or selling medical equipment to buy Bitcoin. Right. And we're a purpose-built Bitcoin company. We're going to build Bitcoin products, Bitcoin cash flow, and we're going to give Bitcoin per share growth to shareholders and be hopefully the best way for investors to get Bitcoin exposure in the public markets.
Jack, I think off camera, just before we started, you used the word vehicle, a vehicle for Bitcoin. I think like a reasonable question that people have is, what does the CEO of a new company whose mission is to accumulate Bitcoin do day to day? Like, what is it that you're going to try and manage or achieve?
Yeah, so for all the Bitcoiners out there, we encourage you to check out our filing. We've introduced two new metrics to the public markets. One is BPS, stands for Bitcoin per share, as opposed to earnings per share. And the other is BRR, which stands for Bitcoin return rate. And my job and what I'm dedicated to do for our shareholders, in which we view similar to our customers, is grow our Bitcoin per share. So we're an operating company. And when you buy a share of 21, in a hypothetical sense, what we intend to do is, let's say our Bitcoin per share is 0.05. Our intent is to be able to grow that to 0.06 Bitcoin per share, 0.07 Bitcoin per share. Where a vehicle like an ETF, your exposure is static. So 21's an operating business, and we will be building Bitcoin products, Bitcoin operative cash flow, and then using the capital markets to accretively grow the Bitcoin on our balance sheet. So we want our shareholders to get wealthier, get richer in Bitcoin terms, and our metrics encourage the market to view us not in fiat terms, in Bitcoin terms, because we're not here to necessarily beat the market. We're here to build a new one and encourage the world to adopt Bitcoin in a sense that we believe it hasn't yet.
But Jack, you will.
So very interesting there. Some of the terminology that he's using, what he's talking about in terms of what he's trying to do, and the comparisons are what are striking to me, right? He's saying, listen, we are a Bitcoin focused company. All these other people, they're pivoting from a software company. They're trying to sell video games or medical equipment. He's literally rattling off and taking shots at MicroStrategy, GameStop, Semler Scientific, and basically saying, yeah, they do this, but we just do this. And so you want to park your money with us. Any thoughts there? Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/BTC Sessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions.
Well, I think it probably was the screaming obvious play for Tether. I think that's one of the interesting points of that Tether is involved, because comparatively, last I looked, Tether's cash flow, their profit there is about 10 times that of MicroStrategy's from the operating business standpoint. So they've got a major advantage of dealing potentially with additional credit. They could take on more leverage because they've got substantially more cash flow. And I wonder how fast they're going to try and run at this.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just to rub salt in the wound, look at the graphic that they released for 21 Capital, literally side by side with the now revamped strategy. But like they all these metrics, pure play Bitcoin exposure. And with strategy, they give it like a 75% and them 100%. Bitcoin native operations, a big donut for MicroStrategy. Existing debt balance, half and half, and 21 is all good. Debt collateralization, insider ownership, purpose-built KPIs. They're basically piece by piece saying, we are better, go with us. We're doing everything better. So, I mean, is Mallers out to eat Sailor's lunch, do you think?
It seems like he's going for it, but though funny enough, and I very well could have missed it. So please forgive me if I'm just absolutely wrong on this. I'm not lying, but I might be wrong too. But the one thing that I've seen is they got all these, like, okay, we got more cash flow. They're introducing some new metrics to measure by. It's like, oh, okay, that's great. They got some big money behind them. I haven't heard one single business plan though. We're gonna do Bitcoin businesses. Excellent. Could you tell me a little bit more about your business? They're gonna be great. At least Sailor has a software business. Yes, it's not a Bitcoin business, but at least he's got a game plan there. Where this feels like this is just an excuse to get some cheap capital, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess we don't really know exactly. There wasn't a lot of specifics. Although, again, I'm sure over time we'll learn a little bit more about it, have a bit more detail. But I mean, everybody's looking for that Bitcoin exposure, and look what it's done for MicroStrategy. Again, he saw a gap in the market. It makes sense that they took it. Now, off the top of the show, we were talking about Mallers, Sailor. They're now in direct competition. They are trying to raise capital in order to buy more Bitcoin. And so, Sailor hasn't slipped up. He just bought another $500 million worth just recently. And they're not the only ones. Of course, you got GameStop, Semler Scientific. You've got a whole bunch kind of throwing their hats in the ring. But what if the central bank wants to start getting their hands on Bitcoin? Well, I mean, we've seen some interest here and there, but we've also seen some things that were proposed. Swiss central bank faces call to hold Bitcoin in reserves. There's a proposal to oblige the SNB, or Swiss National Bank, to hold Bitcoin. It was set in motion. This was late last year, end of December. We then had a story where the Swiss central bank chief basically rejected the whole idea. Hey, we're not going to hold Bitcoin. There's issues with digital currencies. We're good with everything that we have. It's not happening. And so the posturing was, hey, not going to happen. Swiss central bank. And I mean, these guys, you were saying before the show, they were the last country to go off the gold standard, right? And so like they understand hard assets. They understand the value of holding that. It's unfortunate that they ended up bending the knee and going off the gold standard. But there's a saying to not listen to what people say, but watch what they do. And the Swiss central bank is indirectly investing in Bitcoin by purchasing MicroStrategy stocks. So the Swiss National Bank has reportedly entered the Bitcoin market, indirectly acquiring shares of MicroStrategy, a business intelligence firm. We all know who they are. This move highlights a growing institutional interest in digital assets. According to the media outlet The Defiant, the SNB's decision reflects an indirect approach to digital assets, aligning with increasing institutional appetite for cryptocurrencies, aka specifically Bitcoin. Industry observers interpret the move as a strategic pathway for the Swiss central bank to gain exposure to Bitcoin without engaging directly in cryptocurrency purchases. So while the head of the bank was saying, no, we're not doing that, what they're actually doing in practice is trying to get exposure without the optics of actually buying Bitcoin, because it collapses the whole central bank narrative that Bitcoin is useless. it's a really stark move. And when you think of, okay, Jack Mallers, Michael Saylor, they have to raise capital to buy Bitcoin. BitGo, Circle, if they get a bank charter, they have to get loans from the central bank and then purchase Bitcoin. But a central bank can grow their balance sheet at will. Money printer go burr is infinite. And right now, like the GDP of Switzerland is, closing in on 890 billion US dollars. They're not a joke. This is massive. And they're not the only country. Like this is newer, but Norway already started doing the same thing, trying to get exposure to Bitcoin through MicroStrategy. So there's an appetite there from the central banks themselves who are trying to say this stuff is worthless, but their actions are saying the complete opposite. It's crazy. I mean, what are your thoughts here?
Man, I feel like it was always going to go this way. Like, we might not want to have the institutions and the big players coming to join us in Bitcoin, but what did you necessarily think that hyper Bitcoinization was going to look like? It's going to start with on the ground level with the plebs going like, oh my God, I got to get as much of this crappy money and trade it in for Bitcoin. It's going to move to the corporations, same sort of thing. I need to get as much of this crappy money and trade out for Bitcoin as I can. And then from there, it's going to the corporate bank levels. We're seeing like the commercial banks with the charters that looking at for Circle and BitGo. But eventually it would make its way up the stack to the central banks going, oh my God, I got to print the crappy money and get the good stuff. So I'm surprised that like we're starting to see that. I thought that this kind of thing would take a little bit longer. And I know it's a very, very small amount, but everybody just dips their toe in to begin with, right? Everybody plays it safe. They're not quite sure. They need to learn more. They're going to start to experiment. But yeah, this was tucked away in a 49-page, it was 13F SEC filing. They bought 517,000 shares of MicroStrategy, about 150 million at the time. But they're buying MicroStrategy because it's a Bitcoin proxy. It's exactly what Mallers is trying to now offer to other institutions and players out there. And one of the really interesting points about this is that they did indirectly kind of print to do it, but they bought it using their foreign currency reserves. So the Central Bank of Switzerland literally took other banks' fiat paper and traded it for a Bitcoin proxy. Fiat paper that they first actually got by printing their own and then buying it up in the first place. Because, and this is where it's a little nuanced, not quite that, but the foreign currency reserves are there to manage their price, to manage the cost of the Swiss franc. So when the Swiss franc is doing great, they'll print some and they'll buy US dollars, euros, other things, and kind of have those on reserve. It's used to manage it. So they're buying assets that they can also sell off if they need to, that are used to manage it. So dare I say, in a very, very small roundabout way, technically, the Swiss franc is kind of a little bit backed by Bitcoin now.
Yeah, it's wild to see. It is absolutely crazy to see. And so the criticisms that I've heard here is, hey, Swiss Central Bank, Norway, they're not buying Bitcoin. It's through proxy. They're diversifying. They're getting exposure to MicroStrategy and other things. I get that. And that's valid. But there was another crazy interview just yesterday that basically points to the fact that other sovereign wealth funds, central banks, major institutional players are directly buying Bitcoin. I'll just let the clip speak for itself and then we'll chat about it. Here we go.
So for the month of April, as you would expect, gold ETF inflows were massive. I think 8.5 billion roughly from the 2nd through the 22nd. Okay. Might surprise you to learn that Bitcoin ETF flows were net negative to the tune of about 470 million. So the opposite of that was occurring. So institutions, sovereigns, patient pools of capital were piling in during April, which resulted in about a 13% increase in Bitcoin versus 10.5 for gold. And retail via the ETF were exiting. So you got to kind of ask yourself, what do the institutions know that retail doesn't?
What do the institutions know that retail doesn't? And the other thing he said there, sovereign wealth funds and institutions were piling in. Like retail is asleep at the fucking wheel. And then you have the people whose job it is to preserve capital, to preserve purchasing power. And they are piling into Bitcoin in a variety of different ways. And I mean, I feel like this is reflective of what we see from your average person. They have no clue. Like, Nathan, what are you seeing in your normie friend circles? Do they have their eye to Bitcoin? Are they piling in?
Oh, dude, I'm getting no text, no comments. Like, retail hasn't shown up at all. And I don't know if they were completely scared or burned back from like the 2021 cycle, but they have not even remotely arrived, which is why, again, not financial advice, but I still think that the 4-year cycle is very much so intact and that later this year is going to be absolutely crazy because at some point in time, I think they will get that FOMO, but there's that information asymmetry. And we see these giant pools of capital, sovereign wealth funds, taking positions in Bitcoin. It's obvious why, right? If you look back and remember when Russia got kicked off the SWIFT system, they need something neutral that cannot be controlled more than anything by anyone else to protect their purchasing power there. But these guys, they don't act quickly. They're slow. They're methodical. They absolutely have research teams. They can even have investigators, boots on the ground. Like, they've got the resources at their disposal to make smart moves. And if they're seeing an opportunity or if they're making moves now to the point where it's even possibly affecting price, then they know something that we don't because they got the ability to spend the money to find it out.
Yeah. And again, don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Bitcoin Well is the best place to be buying and selling Bitcoin in Canada and the US. And now with Bitcoin Well Infinite, it's also the best place to be making large buys at their OTC desk of over $50,000. Their white glove service gives you fast transactions, no slippage, and the lowest fees. You can scan the QR code on the screen or simply head to bitcoinwell.com/BTC Sessions to sign up today. And you can share your own personalized referral link to earn commissions.